It's Fired Up Friday, and welcome to the Bad Influence Podcast with yours truly, Bjordan Banderas. Listen to what I must tell you today because this can help you make better decisions in your life. The pattern you keep returning to is not a habit. It is a decision you keep making while calling it something else. You know this place, not as a concept, as a specific physical location in your own life that you have stood in before, more than once. The recognition that something needs to change, the clarity about what the change requires, the genuine, not perform, genuinely felt desire to do something different this time. And then the planning starts. The intention firms up. The energy around it builds in the way it always builds at the beginning before the familiar pulls it back. And for that moment, sometimes hours, sometimes days, sometimes long enough that you start telling people about it, it feels different this time. Like the break is actually happening. Like the version of the life you want is finally closer than the version you've been living. And then something happens. Not a dramatic collapse. Not a single moment of failure you can identify cleanly and learn from. Something quieter than that. A small decision that felt reasonable. A retreat that felt justified. A return to the familiar that felt temporary. That you told yourself was temporary, but wasn't. And here you are again, standing in the same place, having the same conversation with yourself, knowing what needs to change, feeling the urgency of it, sitting with the full awareness that the life you want is on the other side of a break you haven't made yet. And the break you haven't made yet is not waiting on better circumstances. It is not waiting on a stronger why or a better system or the right moment when everything lines up cleanly enough that the different choice feels natural. It is waiting on the one thing you have not given it yet. Complete refusal. Not of the pattern in theory, of the pattern in the specific moments it fires and expects your compliance. That is what today is about. And by the time this episode is done, the pattern will have run out of places to hide. The pattern didn't arrive from nowhere. And it didn't arrive as a failure. It arrived as a solution. A real solution to a real problem that existed at a real point in your life. And before anything else gets said about what it has cost you, that needs to be acknowledged. Because the person who understands where the pattern came from is the only person positioned to actually end it. Everyone else just fights the surface behavior while the root keeps running underneath. So let's find the root. Think about the first time the behavior at the center of this pattern appeared. Not the most recent version of it. Not the version you're most familiar with now. The original one. The version that showed up in a specific season of your life when a specific problem existed that you didn't have the resources to meet directly. Because that is what patterns do at their origin. They solve the gap. The gap between what a situation is demanding and what the person inside it has available to give. And the gap was real. Whatever the situation was, whatever the environment was asking of you that you couldn't meet straight on, the gap was not imagined. It was actual. And the pattern closed it. Not perfectly, not cleanly, not in a way that produced everything the situation needed, but well enough. Well enough that the nervous system logged it as a working solution. Well enough that when the next similar demand arrived, the pattern fired automatically. Because that is what nervous systems do with working solutions. They store them. They protect them. They run them without waiting for conscious authorization, because conscious authorization is slow and the nervous system is built for speed. Oh yeah, it is built for speed. It just wants to get you safe. The pattern that guided you through the original problem became the pattern the nervous system reaches for every time anything resembling that problem appears. Even when the resemblance is superficial. Even when the current situation is categorically different from the one that created the pattern. Even when the resources you have now are completely different from the ones you had then. The nervous system doesn't do nuanced comparison. It does pattern matching. And it has been matching this pattern to situations that don't warrant it for longer than you've been aware of what was happening. It's been happening unconsciously. Think about what the original problem actually was. Not the label you've given it in retrospect. The actual experience of being in a situation that requires something you didn't have. Maybe the environment demanded a level of performance you weren't sure you could sustain. Because it happens. And the pattern gave you the exit. Yes, it did. The delay, the deflection, the alternative that made the demand feel more manageable, even though it didn't actually meet it. And the exit worked, in the sense that it reduced the immediate pressure. So the nervous system filed it. Exit equals relief. Relief equals safety. Therefore, exit is the correct response to pressure. And it has been running that equation in every high pressure situation ever since. Even the ones where staying and delivering would have produced something that changed everything. Even the ones where the exit cost you more than the discomfort of staying would have. I have done this, and I've seen a lot of you doing this. Or maybe the original environment was genuinely unpredictable. People whose warmth and coldness came without warning. Circumstances that shifted before you could orient to them. A foundation that felt stable until suddenly it wasn't. And the pattern was the way you learned to stay one step ahead of the instability. To control what could be controlled in an environment where almost nothing else could be. That strategy was not weakness. That was intelligence operating inside a difficult constraint. The problem is the constraint ended. The unpredictable environment resolved or changed or became something different. And the pattern kept running as though nothing had changed. Oh yes, it did. As though the instability was still present and the control strategy was still necessary in a life that no longer required either. It happens more often than you think. You know that feeling. Not as a description, as something that happens in your body in a specific moment on a specific kind of day. The moment the pattern wins again. Not the dramatic version of that moment. The quiet version. Yeah, the quiet version. The one that doesn't announce itself. The one that arrives as a settling. A barely perceptible release of the tension that had been building around the possibility of doing something different. And underneath that release, almost immediately underneath it, something else arrives. Not relief exactly, something adjacent to relief that doesn't have relief's quality. A flatness. Specific and familiar. The physical registration of a person who just chose the same thing they always choose. Who stood at the threshold of the break and stepped back from it one more time. And some part of their body, not their mind, their body, knows exactly what that means. Yes, it does. That flatness is not small. It does not stay in the moment it arrives. It accumulates, layer by layer by layer. Every time the pattern wins, every time the familiar pulls you back from the break that was finally available, the flatness adds itself to what was already there. And you know it. Until it becomes the texture of ordinary days. Not a sharp pain you can locate and address. A heaviness that you've been carrying so long, you've started to mistake it for your personality. For the way things feel. For the baseline of what a day is supposed to cost you. But it is not your personality. It is not the way things feel. It is the accumulated physical cost of a pattern that has been winning the moments that matter for longer than it was ever supposed to. Today we're going deep. So feel your chest right now. Not metaphorically. Actually feel it. Is there an openness there? The specific spaciousness of a person who is moving in alignment with what they actually want? Or is there a compression? A weight sitting in the middle of it that arrives so gradually you stop noticing when it became permanent. That compression is not stress from today. That is the weight of the gap. The gap between where the pattern has kept you and where the broken pattern would have taken you. And that gap has been widening, quietly, without drama, every single time the familiar won. It is true. Feel what happens in your body in the moment just before the pattern fires. When the break is available. When the different choice is right there. Close enough to make it, clear enough to see, real enough that some part of you recognizes this is the moment. There is a physical response before any reasoning forms. A tightening, a pulling back that happens in the chest before the mind has constructed a single argument for why this particular moment isn't quite right for the break. That physical response is not discernment. It is not the reasonable voice of experience telling you to wait for better conditions. It is the nervous system executing the old instruction. Protect the pattern. In the exact moment the pattern's authority could have been broken. And you have been following that instruction every time it fires. Which is exactly why the flatness keeps arriving. Exactly why the compression keeps building, and exactly why today is the day that changes. Here is what protecting the pattern has actually cost you. Not eventually. Already. In real and specific and already visible ways that are showing up in your life right now. Let's start with the results. The ones you keep saying you want to keep but not having. Not the results that were impossible given the circumstances. No, not those. The ones that were possible. The ones that had your name on them. Yeah, those ones. The ones you got close to, genuinely close, closer than you usually acknowledge. And then the pattern fire and the return happened and the result didn't. Be honest about the connection between those missing results and the pattern you keep returning to. Yeah, be honest. Not the external factors, not the timing or the resources or the circumstances that weren't quite right. The pattern. How many times has the pattern been the actual reason the results didn't arrive? How many times did you approach the threshold with everything required to cross it finally present? And the familiar pulled you back before you could. Not once, not twice. Enough times that a person looking at the evidence from outside will have to conclude the pattern is not incidental to the missing results. It is the cause of them. And you've known that. Not always at the surface, but in the honest moments. The ones that happen in the quiet before the performance starts, you've known. You felt the connection between what you keep doing and what you keep not having. And you found ways to explain the gap that don't require looking at the pattern directly. Oh yes, you have found those ways. Because looking at the pattern directly means acknowledging that the obstacle is not outside you. It is the thing you keep doing instead of the thing that will change everything. Now, look at the time. The specific irreversible time that has moved through this pattern. Not the time that served the process. Not the seasons that were genuinely necessary for development. No. The time lost to the return. To standing in the same place after every genuine attempt to leave it and finding the pattern is still intact. Is still waiting, is still familiar, is still offering the same settlement that cost the same price. That time is gone. It does not come back. And the momentum that will have compounded inside that time, the results that will have built on each other, the identity that will have solidified, the version of the life that was available during those seasons, that version didn't wait for the pattern to break. It moved on. And the gap between where you are and where the broken pattern would have taken you is wider now than it was the first time you recognized this needed to change. Sit with that. Yes, sit with it. Not to punish yourself with it. No, that's not what I want for you. To feel the actual size of what the pattern has been taking. Because the gap is real and it is growing. Not catastrophically, quietly. Yeah. One return at a time. One moment of compliance at a time. One day of the familiar winning at a time. And it will keep growing until the break actually happens. Now, look at the people in your life. The ones who have been watching this pattern play out across the seasons. Who have seen the genuine intention followed by a familiar return. Who have adjusted quietly, without announcing it, without making it a conversation, what they actually expect from you based on the evidence you have provided them. They love you. That part hasn't changed. But their belief in the specific change you keep saying is coming, that has been revised. Not by judgment, by pattern recognition. They are doing exactly what nervous systems do, logging the evidence and updating the expectation accordingly. Yes, that's exactly what it's doing. And the evidence you have given them is the evidence of a person whose genuine intention keep meeting the same pattern on the way to becoming real. And you have earned that revision. Yes, you have. Not because you are not capable, because capability without the pattern broken is just potential. That's exactly what it is. And potential that never converts stops inspiring the people who are watching it. The ones who wanted to believe in you most have been the most quietly hurt by the gap between what they believe you're capable of and what the pattern keeps producing instead. Now look at your relationship with your word, the private version of it, the one that runs in the honest moments before the performance starts. How much do you trust what you tell yourself now versus how much you trusted it before the pattern became established? Because every time the pattern wins, every time the break was available and the return happened instead, something specific happened to self-trust. Not dramatic damage, cumulative damage in the slight hedge that appears before you make a commitment now. The unconscious qualification of your own promise because some part of you has learned that the pattern might surface before the promise can be kept. That hedge is not humility. That is a person whose word has been softened by their own track record with themselves. And a person who doesn't fully trust their own word cannot build at the level the life they want requires. Truth bomb. Here is the truth that changes the entire equation. The pattern is not who you are. It is what you have been doing instead of who you are. Yes. And those two things are not the same. Who you are is the person underneath the pattern. The one who has been present in the moments the pattern briefly lost its grip. The one who showed up completely in the seasons when the break actually happened. Even partially. And something different got produced. That person has always been there. Not waiting to be built. Waiting to be chosen over the pattern that has been standing in front of them. And the choosing, it starts with understanding what the break actually requires. Because the break is not a feeling. It is not the arrival of readiness. It is not the moment when the fear is finally small enough that the different choice feels natural. The fear does not get small before the break. The fear gets small because of the break. That is so true. That sequence matters more than almost anything else this episode will say. You have been waiting for the fear to reduce before you make the move. But the fear reduces after the move, not before. And waiting for the before means the break never comes. Because the before never arrives. It never arrives. The nervous system does not grant courage in advance. It doesn't. It grants it in retrospect as the experience of having done the thing while the fear was present and surviving it completely. That experience is what actually changes the operating system. Not the intention to break the pattern. Not the plan for breaking it. Not the recognition, however clear, however painful, however many times it has arrived, that the pattern is the thing standing between you and everything you say you want. The experience of breaking it while afraid. That is the only input the nervous system accepts as evidence that something has actually changed. And that experience is one action away, one specific action taking in the specific moment the pattern fires and expects your compliance. That action is not everything. It is the first thing. The thing that produces the first counter evidence the nervous system has ever received from you about this pattern. And counter evidence, built on real experience rather than intention, is what actually begins to change the authority the pattern holds. So let's get specific, because the break is not a general commitment to being different. It is not a declaration that the pattern is over. It is one action identified in advance, committed to completely, that you take when the pattern fires rather than following. One conversation you have instead of avoiding. One commitment you keep instead of softening at the edges until it collapses. One moment you stay in the discomfort instead of reaching for the familiar exit that has always been there waiting. One decision made from the version of yourself that breaks patterns rather than the version that protects them. Just one. Done completely, without the reservation that softens the break enough for the pattern to survive it in modified form. That is the standard. Not perfection across every moment. Completeness in this one. And here is what the one complete action produces. Not the full result. Not the transformation. Something more foundational than either. New evidence. That's right. For the first time, the nervous system receives a data point that directly contradicts the pattern's claim to authority over you. It receives the experience of the pattern being broken and nothing catastrophic following. Of the discomfort being survived, of the different choice being made and the world remaining intact. Of you remaining intact. More than intact. Change in the specific way that only the experience of having done the hard thing while afraid can change a person. And that data point, however small it appears in the moment it is created, is the beginning of the end of the pattern's authority. Because the pattern's authority is built entirely on evidence. Evidence that the familiar is safer than the difference. Evidence that the return is more survivable than the break. Evidence accumulated across every retreat, across every moment of compliance, that has been reinforcing the pattern's claim that it is the correct response to pressure. And the first complete break directly contradicts every piece of that evidence. With something the pattern has never had to face from you before. Your complete refusal. Not negotiation. Not the softened version of refusal that bends the pattern while leaving it structurally intact. The action that the pattern cannot survive. That's what action does. And the pattern that cannot survive your complete refusal has been running your life. Has been determining what you build and what you abandon and what you approach indefinitely without ever arriving. Has been producing the flatness and the compression and the quiet revision of your own word that you have been carrying as though it were simply the weight of being you. It is not the weight of being you. It is the weight of a pattern that mistook your compliance for permission. And the permission ends today. Yes, it does. Now let's talk about the identity that the break installs. Because this is where the shift becomes permanent rather than temporary. The person who breaks the pattern once, who takes the action that contradicts the familiar in the moment it matters most, is categorically different from the person who almost broke it. Not because of the result the action produced, because of the evidence the action created about who they are. They now have proof, not belief, not intention, not the feeling of being ready. Proof that when the moment came, when the pattern fired and the familiar pulled, and everything in them that had been trained toward compliance felt the pull, they did something different. And that proof becomes the foundation of a self-concept the pattern cannot coexist with. Not someone who is trying to break the pattern. Someone who broke it. Past tense. Real. Yes, real. Done. That's what you have to do. And if this episode hit the nerve it was built to hit, if something in here named the pattern and the protection and the specific flatness that arrives every time compliance wins, hit that subscribe button right now, because every single Friday on the Bad Influence podcast with yours truly, we come back to this exact confrontation. The one that doesn't let you stay comfortable inside a pattern that is quietly eating the life you were supposed to be building. The one that names the break and refuses to accept the softened version of it. The one that calls the complete refusal out of you and holds you to it. This is not a podcast for people who want to understand their patterns. This is a podcast for people who are ready to end them. Completely. In the moments that actually matter. Without the reservation that lets them survive. That's what I'm all about. Now let's talk about what accumulates on the other side of the first break. Because the first break is not the destination. It is the proof that the destination is real. The proof that the version of yourself that doesn't comply with this pattern is not hypothetical. It is not reserved for some future season when the conditions are finally right. It is available right now. In the next moment, the pattern fires, which is sooner than you think. Yes, it is. And what accumulates across every break that follows the first one is not just results. It is a new relationship with your own word. The specific restoration of self-trust that happens when the evidence of who you are starts to outweigh the evidence of what the pattern has been producing. When the commitments you make to yourself start being kept rather than softened. When the hedge disappears from your own promises because the track record that created it has been replaced by a different one. That restoration is not small. It is the foundation that everything else gets built on. The version of yourself that the life you want actually requires. The one who shows up completely, commits without the hidden reservation, builds without the pattern running underneath and waiting to surface at the worst possible moment. That version is built one complete break at a time. And if you really want to change your life, you have to remember this. No matter what happens, no matter what you decide to do, no matter what anyone tells you to do or to follow or anything like that, the choice is yours.